We have a lot of news to cover in today's video, including the latest trade talk around the NHL. Today we're looking at the latest talk around the Ottawa Senators, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Vancouver Canucks. Some updates on the Calgary Flames as well, and it looks like the Toronto Maple Leafs and William Nylander are getting really close to a mega contract extension. We'll discuss the latest details that have emerged on that front. We have another waiver claim today and some key injury updates, including guys like Connor Bedard and Jack Hughes. All that and more coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, we have a lot of news to cover here today, as well as some important trade rumors that could lead to some big deals if these come to be later on closer to the NHL trade deadline. But first, we have news from the NHL waiver wire. We had a claim today, and of course, we had a little trade earlier today. We had the Blackhawks, of course, picking up Rem Pitlick from Pittsburgh, and in that video, I mentioned I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago made another type of move like this to pick up another player, somebody who might be kind of considered like an extra player or somebody who's got NHL experience that's been kind of going back and forth. And that's exactly what they did here. They picked up Zach Sanford on waivers. So within a matter of a couple of hours, they picked up Rem Pitlick and Zach Sanford. Of course, the Blackhawks are really hampered with injuries right now. Like, they are completely ravished. Their complete top line is now out. Of course, we saw Connor Bedard the other night against the New Jersey Devils go down, and we now know the extent of the injury. It turned out to be a fractured jaw. They have not given a timeline yet, but certainly something like that is not going to be short term. So Bedard will be out for a little while. I know there's a lot of debate about the hit laid by defenseman Brendan Smith on Bedard, whether or not it was clean, dirty, should a player safety be involved? And to be completely honest, I don't think there was anything wrong with the hit. I mean, I really hate to see Bedard take the hit. I hate to see him be hurt. He was having a phenomenal rookie season. Obviously better for the game, and I'd be curious to see for what he could accomplish this year if he could play a full season. But at the end of the day, that clean, it was a clean hit. There's nothing wrong. It's textbook. He didn't leave his feet. He didn't extend his elbow. There is a size difference between the two players, and I've said before, and other times, like sometimes when there is a drastic height difference of 4, 5, 6 inches, sometimes that can lead to these types of hits. Now, obviously, Bedard did get hit in the face, but it's mainly because of the difference in size, and unfortunately, Bedard, he's used to slicing through the middle and, doing his moves, and he quite often gets away with it, but he just, had his head down just for a split second. That's all it takes. Smith stepped up and hit him. It's unfortunate. He will be out, but I don't have a problem with the hit itself. Obviously, I hope he's not out too long, but we'll have to wait and see. They also lost Nick Foligno in the same game against the Devils. There was lots of fights. Of course, even though it was a clean hit, the Hawks were furious over Bedard's injury, and there were several, you could say scraps and skirmishes afterwards, one of which led to Nick Foligno in a fight, and he did end up with a fractured finger. So Foligno is now out as well. They're already without guys like Taylor Hall and several others. Taylor Radish is out. Lots of other, I think they have like 9 regulars right now that are on injured reserve. So that's why they're making a play here to pick up some other, fringe NHLers to kind of fill the roster. So the Blackhawks were already one of the, lower teams in the league, one of the worst teams and best odds at finishing last. And now they've pretty much lost all of their remaining top players that can actually put the puck in the net, especially Bedard. So that's not good news from the entertainment standpoint, but a good news if you're hoping the Blackhawks have another shot at getting first overall again. Obviously, you can only win 2 times in a 5-year span, but still could be another good year for Blackhawks when it comes to drafting. Unfortunately, though, has to come at the expense of all these injuries. But you know what? Fair to say, if they had stayed healthy, they wouldn't have been all that much higher in the standings. Anyway, now later in that same game, in the third period, we saw Jack Hughes injured his wrist, is what it looks like. He ended up leaving the game. We don't know exactly what he's dealing with. They're looking at more imaging and waiting for more tests from the doctors. Essentially, it's unfortunate because tonight there was supposed to be another Hughes versus Hughes. Obviously, the Devils are facing the Canucks, where all three Hughes brothers would once again be on the ice together, but Jack is unable to play. We don't know a timeline, but Elliotte Friedman reported on Saturday Headlines tonight that they're optimistic that he can avoid surgery, so that hopefully it's not too long of a return. But obviously his absence will be significant since he played such a big role for New Jersey, who's in a very tight, very competitive Metro division. And much as you think that they have a decent shot at playoffs, it's far from a guarantee. If they go on any team in that grouping that's kind of vying for the last few spots, if they go on a bit of a tailspin, they can knock themselves out. So certainly hate to see that because of injuries, but that's where things stand in that front. Los Angeles Kings goalie Phoenix Copley has been confirmed to be done for the rest of the season. He did end up having to have surgery for a repaired ACL, so it's a long recovery. So he is done for the year. So David Riddick, who was their third string goalie, has already been recalled. Obviously, after the injury first took place, he's been up there for a little bit, and he'll be staying there. So the Kings have signed Aaron Dell to the AHL's Ontario Reign as the tryout for the time being. We'll see what other moves they make. Talbot has played well for them, but are they comfortable going deep into playoffs or deep into the season into the playoffs with Riddick as their number 2? I'm not so sure. I wouldn't be completely shocked if we've seen the Kings try to add some more depth to the position and find some more goaltending help around the league somewhere. I'm not sure who they would turn to. There's a number of teams that have a third goaltender that's likely available, but the prices are high and lots of teams looking. So we'll see what that leads to here over time. The Calgary Flames are reportedly talking to Noah Hanifin's camp again on a potential contract extension. This is probably about the third time that we've heard this. We heard there was talks ongoing to start the year, and then they kind of stalled, and then we heard they were getting close again back a couple months ago. Then we heard basically right around the time they were having all these talks, the Flames went on a major downward spiral, and then we had heard that Hanifin essentially, even though they seemed to have an agreement in verbally at least, he backed away from it and changed his mind. And now it sounds like the Flames, according to Elliotte Friedman on Saturday Headlines tonight, they are talking again. He did not want to give it, put it like any kind of odds or anything on it. It's hard to kind of, dictate how likely this is going to be to get done. I still think more likely than not that he gets dealt. I know before the contract that they had in place before seemed to be pretty much pretty fair and pretty, reasonable for both sides. I think it was right around 7 times 7 is what they were looking at, something in that ballpark. It was around 7 years, $49 to $50 million, and he didn't take it. He decided to back away. Now, you would think that the framework was probably already there. So if they're talking, it's more about, does he want to stay? Will he consider it? I mean, the Flames are far from a guarantee being a playoff team. They kind of had their ups and downs this year. I guess before they make a deal, because it's been reported there's a fair bit of talk and interest around the player, which makes sense that they want to make another stab at signing him before they pull the trigger on a deal. So we'll see where that goes. Now, Friedman also reported tonight that the Leafs and William Nylander, they sure sound like they're awfully close to getting this contract extension done. And he said that they obviously return home tomorrow because tonight is the end of their California road trip. And he would not be surprised if this is announced as early as possibly Monday. Could be a little later, but he says it wouldn't surprise him to see it by Monday. Of course, Nylander did not come anywhere close to really wanting to sign anything in the summertime. The Leafs did try. Obviously, the numbers they were throwing at him were not anywhere near what he wanted. He bet on himself and just had another monster season where he's just taken it a step further and improved yet again. So obviously increased his value. Now it sounds, according to Friedman, that it's going to be an 8-year deal, somewhere around $11.5 million. Now, at one point, we knew that they were trying to get him to sign for under 9, and then I've heard that they would be willing to go 9.95, something in that range. And then the season started really good. We're like, well, it's going to be at least 10 now, and now we're all the way up to 11.5. Now, like some people had said before, the David Pastrnak contract is 11.25, and those two are comparable players for the production they put up. They're also great friends, which I know from a production standpoint and business standpoint doesn't matter, but Nylander's going to want try to one up the players that he is most comparable with, and especially ones he's friends with. So clearly that was a number to look at. But I think more importantly, they used the internal other Leaf contracts as comparables. Now, it'll be interesting to see how this affects the Marner negotiations, which will be this time next year. We'll see where that goes. But William Nylander is set to become the 4th player on the Leafs roster, making north of $10 million. 11.5 would be about 13% of the cap. Friedman said essentially that they really want to keep the player. They're prepared to do this. And even though it might have some other ramifications to their salary cap, that they'll deal with it later. So obviously they still have another year for Tavares. So next year, like I said before, I think is going to be tricky. But the year after Tavares' contract is up, even if he stays, I would suspect he re-signs for a lower number. The cap will go up, but basically you're given the full salary cap increase to Willie. At this point, so it doesn't really allow you to do other things with your roster. We'll see how this year ends for them. Of course, the regular season's been pretty good, but it really boils down to what kind of playoff success they have. Are they going to make it further than last year? Will they get closer to a Stanley Cup? Can they justify this? And like I said, if they get to a point where it becomes obvious that there's really something else missing on their roster to really push them to be cup contenders or stronger cup contenders, then clearly, it's going to be challenging to do, at least for next year. The year after, we'll have another cap increase, and then the Tavares contract coming off the books. So, like I said, even if he re-signs for less money, I don't know how much less it'll be. Let's say he signs at a couple more years at $7 million or something to that effect. Well, between the cap going up and his number going down, that does give them more flexibility. So they're probably another year away from having that. But, he certainly earned his contract. I have no concern that this contract is unfair or anything. I think it's totally fair. He's earned it. It's a great deal. I don't blame the Leafs for wanting to keep him, but it just makes it really complicated having 4 players eating up that much of your salary cap, and it makes it really hard to provide a stronger supporting cast. They're all great players, but you can't do it all by yourself. You need good help. You need a deep team, and that's just hard to do. So we'll see how things play out here, but expect a Nylander contract extension, by the sounds of things, as early as first of the week. Now, when it comes to some other trades around the NHL, some other rumors, we're looking at the Pittsburgh Penguins. There's lots of talk around the future of pretty consistent 30-40 goal scorer Jake Guentzel. Now, Jake Guentzel's a pending UFA. He's been signed on a longer-term deal around over $6 million. Been a very, very good, productive player, not only in the regular season, but playoff Jake Guentzel's been pretty darn good and extremely important in their Stanley Cup wins while he's been there. Jake Guentzel and his agent, Ben Hankinson, are prepared at this point, based on the reports from the fourthperiod.com, that they're prepared to wait. They're not in a rush to sign here at all. Comments from his agent, it basically says that he's not too worried about it right now. He said he has a great relationship with Penn's GM, Kyle Dubas. They talk frequently. For right now, they've decided to put off talks, and Guentzel and his agent aren't really going to look at the contract until the offseason. Essentially, some other reporters are saying that Guentzel, as much as he has really been had a great time being a Penguin, had a lot of success individually and as a team, that he kind of wants to see the direction in the future of where this thing is heading in Pittsburgh. Not that he's unwilling to sign, he just kind of wants to get a feel for where things are going. Clearly, Hankinson also said he understands that they have an older team. The team has struggled this year, hasn't been consistent, and with the business side of things, that they know being unsigned, going closer to the deadline, that it's possible Dubas could decide to take this team in a new direction, which could lead to Jake Guentzel getting traded. It's just that simple. Not a given that it happens, of course. We don't know the direction of the team, but they're acknowledging the fact that they understand it's possible, but they're still prepared to wait things out and look at the contract in the offseason. Even if Guentzel were to be moved, I don't know that I would completely rule out the possibility of him going back to Pittsburgh in the offseason if he liked where things were going and they had a deal that worked for both sides. Essentially, at this point, though, what I would like to mention is that if he is made available, if the Penguins do not get their act together to the point that they're for sure a playoff team, and he becomes available, The one team I really think we should look to is the Vancouver Canucks. Now, the Canucks, of course, we know have the former Penguins brain trust, Jim Rutherford, Patrick Allvin, and how many people have they brought in to the Canucks organization, whether it be players or staff, that have that Pittsburgh connection? A lot. They have a head coach in Rick Tocchet who they knew him from Pittsburgh. They assistant coaches like Gonchar came from Pittsburgh. They've even brought some role players like a Sam Lafferty who they knew from that time as well. Clearly, they have guys that they like and guys that they're familiar with, and a lot of managers around the NHL, and Rutherford's guilty of this more than just about anybody, of dealing with people that he knows and trusts and has connections with. So certainly Gensel is a proven playoff performer, a great consistent player, and we know that this Canuck team right now is trending towards being a fairly high-ranked playoff team, and that the management team would definitely want to make a move to bolster the lineup and give them like a reward to strengthen them as much as possible to have playoff success. They not only need to do that for their own well-being, to see how far they can go, but they have some big tough decisions of their own, including a contract extension for Elias Pettersson and they'd love to get done. And of course, a great way to get that done and prove to him that he should stay is to have a season where they make the playoffs and have playoff success. That would probably go a long way to convincing him that things are going in the right direction and he should sign long-term, or at least on a fairly long-term deal to stay. So to me, look for Pittsburgh and Vancouver to engage in conversation should they decide that a trade involving Gensel is something they really seriously want to explore. Now, word is out of Friedman as well on the Saturday headline segment that the Ottawa Senators are starting to get aggressive on the market after talking to sources and from a lot of different front offices around the NHL. It sounds like newly appointed GM Steve Staios is having a lot of conversations around the league on a variety of facets. The one type of player they appear to be looking for is veteran help for the forward group, somebody who can play a strong 200-foot game, like players who are, solid pros, play the right way, and they don't obviously have, defensive issues. They want like a 200-foot player who can chip in offensively. So clearly this team has been lacking, structure. They've been lacking that commitment to team defense, and they need to bring in some more players to help with that. They were obviously been asked about moving any young pieces and core players, and so right now the answer to that is that they do not want to do that. Any of their young star players are not available. That would likely include Brady Tkachuk, Tim Stützle, Jake Sanderson, I would suppose, likely Drake Batherson, Ridley Gregg, Shane Pinto, Jacob Chikrin, but there's certainly lots of other role players or middle six guys that are certainly, I think, up for debate if the right deal comes along. I'm sure they're willing to look at their UFAs like Kubalik, Tarasenko. I wonder about, maybe a guy like a Brandstrom. If there is any of the bigger names that they would be willing to consider moving, I do kind of wonder if they would move one of their left shot D. They do have three. They obviously are all similar type defensemen as well. Sanderson's more of a 200-foot complete defenseman, but he's young, still needs a little bit of work, but a really, really solid upside. Will be one of the top young defensemen in the league for a long time. But there's a lot of similarities between Chikrin and Chabot. Chabot makes a ton of money. I don't have any information to suggest they're shopping him or want to move him, but I just personally got feeling, kind of wonder if they would go there, if the right offer came along, if they could get themselves another, solid star forward or star goaltender in the mix. I'm sure both goalies are available for trade if a team wanted to take them off their hands as well. They have not been solid or consistent this year at all. So, to me, the Sens are out there looking. They're looking for some solid veteran help to mix in with these young players who can kind of help lead the way. Claude Giroux can't do it all by himself, essentially. So that's where they're at. They need assistance. The young players, but are not available right now. They don't want to go there. But like I said, Chabot's not really a young player. And I just wonder if they would do that. If an offer came along, he logs a lot of minutes. He's a great skater. But I do wonder if he peaked early in his career, because when he signed that extension that he got for 8 years, he was a 50-point defenseman, and we haven't really seen that version of him since. So we'll have to wait and see where things go. He's also battled a lot of injuries. So I wonder what the future holds in Ottawa. They definitely need some change, but what exactly it becomes or brings in the near future is up for debate. Let me know your thoughts on all of today's news and rumors down in the comments. We'll discuss further. If you're new to the channel, of course, make sure you subscribe and stick around so you don't miss anything, and I'll catch you next time.